What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today I thought it would be a great day to have a way too early 2025 NFL mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys know how to use YouTube. Below my face is my board. These are all the guys that I have official grades on, so you can check out videos on every single one of them over on my show. We are finishing up with the safety class, the top guys of the safety class, and then we're going to be going all back around and finishing up all the players that I think are going to be within discussion for this coming draft cycle, and by doing deep dives at every position. But there is at least pretty much a top 10, apart from defense interior, because it's kind of a crap class. But besides that, there is a top 10 or more for every single position except for safeties at this moment. So super excited for that. Check those out. Below my board is all the great ways to get involved with the community, as well as take advantage of our two sponsors, Olipop, as well as UnderDog Fantasy. UnderDog is my favorite sponsor that I've ever had. They treat me really well. If you guys are a first-time user, just literally go to the link tree in the description. All you do is you gotta click that. It has all the links to my show as well, so it's super duper easy. Click on the UnderDog. It will take you right to the page. Have my code in there as well, and then you just deposit $10, or you can deposit up to $500, and then they give you 50% match for free. You can get up to $250 for free. And they've treated me really, really well. I'm going to have a big-ass flag. I actually have it on the ground next to me, but they sent me that. They sent me a ton of stuff, too. They're a great brand. I'm not saying that because I'm forced to. They actually just treat me really damn well. And every single time you guys do that, where you deposit $10 on your first time, it gives me 60. So full transparency right there. Always appreciate that, but it is a brand that I genuinely love. I'm actually going to be using it quite often. Forgetting if the UFC is today or not, but if it is, then there's actually a special promo for new users where you get 2 free special picks, but you get to end up having pretty much, I think Pereira is a half a strike, it's an instant win, so you get to have that, and then you have 2 other bets that you can put on there to be able to multiply your money, essentially, rather than having to win 3 bets, you're winning 2. It's super exciting. It's a great brand, and they have stuff for WNBA, NFL, NBA, everything. So super excited for that. And then even for the combine, they found a legal loophole to where they can end up doing some stuff for that. That was fun this past season. But let's get right into this and let's have a good time. This draft order is by, I believe, FanDuel. Yes, it is FanDuel's Super Bowl odds as of right now. So don't get mad at me for this. You'll have the chance to get mad at me for the records prediction videos, or that I'm already doing the deep dives, and that will determine my draft order early on. So when that happens, feel free to target me for the draft order. But again, you might be like surprised at my board. These are the exact grades. So you can also tell who has a high grade and who doesn't. I don't do this, like I'm doing this for full transparency. I know that it's some pretty wild shit that's on my board, but at the same time, I want to be honest with you guys. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen in a couple of months anyways, especially in a year. So I'd rather be brutally honest and then brutally wrong than try to project something by pulling it out of my ass. Just got to be honest there. So I hope that you guys do enjoy that part. So starting out with the first overall pick, we have the Carolina Panthers. And when looking over their roster, honestly, I think defensive back is probably one of the positions I would value the most. I think that, first off, they're going to be a lot better than the worst team in the NFL. I do have faith in them. I have faith in Bryce Young to bounce back. Canales has been able to turn back Geno Smith, as well as Baker Mayfield, into very solid quarterbacks. So for me, I am a big fan of what he could be doing for this team. However, we're going to still enjoy giving Carolina Panthers fans a great player for as long as possible. And starting out for the Carolina Panthers, it's Will Johnson. To me, he is far superior to every other player in the class. He's far superior to any other player that I pretty much studied except Sauce Gardner. And y'all know Sauce was my type of guy. He's the greatest player I've ever graded. Of course, I don't think he would have graded as well as Will Johnson did. My grading scale now is a little bit tougher on corners than it was before, and Will Johnson's an absolute freak show. I have him comped to an alien, 6'2", 202 pounds, and he moves like he's 180, but he also has the physicality of someone who's 210. There's just nothing that's bad with Will Johnson, and honestly, his grade should be higher, because for ball skills, I should have just put that as ball production. He doesn't have a ton of interceptions. He doesn't have a ton of stuff, but he is really solid at the catch point. So Will Johnson's phenomenal. I do think he's the best player in the class. Dante Jackson ended up being sent to the Steelers. Granted, he would have been on contract year anyway. So Will Johnson is the selection there. At pick 2 for the New England Patriots. This is a team that can go plenty of ways. I do believe that you guys are going to be trying to keep Caden Wallace as a right tackle. So that's super exciting. It's a very malleable offensive line right now. Owenu being so flexible is honestly a very big plus. And I do think that, when you do analyze the whole situation, City Sal, I do believe is a starting caliber offensive lineman. Obviously, I know that there's that injury there. I think Cole Strange is going to be banged up. If it's my memory's failing me, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong at the moment. But essentially, you do have the possibility of still adding a left tackle. And Will Campbell would not be a bad choice. He is my number one. Isn't he my number one left tackle? He is. There's not many really good left tackles in this class, to be fair. But, I think that there's some really, really talented offensive linemen, just not really offensive tackles. But I do think that you could be looking at that edge rusher position for this team. I think you could be looking at a wide receiver for this team. I would not be against them going after an edge rusher, though. Like, I love Nick Scourton. I do think that he belongs in this range, and I think he does take this Patriots defense and adds a little bit extra because Judon is not going to be there forever. It's not like he's a spring chicken either. I do think that is a potential likely option if they are here. Deep down, if Will Johnson's available, I am selfishly going to be choosing that. However, for the Patriots, I know the offensive line is the easy thing to target for him. I'm not going to do that. I will be potentially looking at that wide receiver. God, this class sucks at wide receiver. It really does. I mean, the top guys are not that good. I'm just going to be honest. You can see there's not even a wide receiver in my top 20. And then my number 21 guy is not somebody who's in anybody's top 20. So just, keep that in mind. I do think that I will be going the edge rusher position here. I'm going to be going Nick Scourton, formerly Purdue, now Texas A&M. He is the best edge rusher in the class. He has excellent size. To me, he is pretty much, I think he graded a little bit better than my boy who's now on the Dallas Cowboys that they took in the second round. But I think that he's right there between Latu and why am I forgetting my friend's name of all people? Like, this is what happens when you're sick and then you take some time off, right? But regardless, I think that Nick Scourton's going to be an absolute asset. I think he's going to be great. Marshawn Nealon's the name that I'm trying to think of. The fact that I literally am like, dude, we're probably going to be getting barbecue within the next month, and I forgot his name on air. Of all the people, right? It's the people who you don't really think about having to remember that you always do. You guys know the deal. But Nick Scourton's awesome. He's just pretty much a little bit better version of my boy Marshawn Nealon, and that's pretty damn good value there at pick 2. He's my number 3 player in the class. I do think that he brings the size, and then I think he's up to 280. Like, it's just ridiculous. He brings a lot of talent and a lot of athleticism comparable for his size. At pick number 3 for the Denver Broncos, I do think offensive line is not out of the question, but I do think the secondary is not very good. Ben Morrison is awesome. I think that he could bring some Marshawn Lattimore to the table that I do think Sean Payton would love. And especially with some of the drama that has been around the potential Pat Surtain rumors in the past. Granted, it's probably fueled by Eagles fans more than actual Denver Broncos people. But I do think that developing your wide receiver core, especially in this class, is a better idea than going reacquiring wide receiver talent. I don't think offensive line is a bad decision at all. I don't think that's a really bad decision remotely. Defense interior, it's actually not bad on your team, so I don't mind that. I do think edge rusher, though, you got Nick Bonito, who's going to be a potential star. I mean, I was a big fan of Nick Bonito coming out. I do think you just need to get somebody else in that room there, because pretty sure Baron Browning is up for a contract. There's a lot of dudes on that team that are up for a contract at the moment. I do think that it would be wise to be able to potentially reinvest in that edge core. James Pierce, someone who I could see developing a lot. Harold Perkins is the guy who I love the most because I think your linebacking core also not good, because I'm pretty sure both of your guys are on 1-year contracts as well. This could be, if Harold Perkins gets up to 230, this could be a Harold Perkins pick. But 220, I can't justify it. I'm going to be going Ben Morrison here. In the top 3, I will be going with my top 3 players. Ben Morrison's a blue chip graded player, which means that he should be a true corner 1 on a team. That's pretty hard to do. Like, it's pretty hard to be graded as a blue chip player. Last year's class was just super special to me. This year, it's still very special class, as you can see by the sheer amount of them in my top 10 and in my top 18. You'll just see a ton of corners. And maybe it's just because I'm a sucker for corners. But if I end up seeing that their value doesn't line up with where I have them here, I also have the ability to shift positional value. So keep that in mind as well. This is all a very malleable board. At pick number 4 for the New York Giants, I do think they'll be looking for a quarterback. And, I don't have this quarterback as high as maybe some other people do. But I also have been on record as saying I think this guy could very, very easily end up being the best quarterback in the class. And it's not Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck is the highest floor quarterback in the class. Like, I have Dylan Gabriel and Jalen Daniels extremely high on my board. And I'm thinking about potentially adding even more negative points to Dylan Gabriel, like to the guys who are sub 6 foot, basically making an automatic -5 for that, which is huge. That's a huge hit. Right now, it's like -2 or 3. That would be a much bigger hit. So feel free to leave your comments on that, because I do think that could potentially be something I start factoring in. I know height isn't everything, but it is certainly something when you have 6'6", even upwards of 6'8" with Andreas Pete, interior offensive lineman right in front of you, and you are actually almost a full foot shorter. It is a little bit tough to see. So debating putting that in there. Again, I'm perfectly fine with criticism. Feel free to just be a douche. Just don't be a douche about it, right? Like, you can tell me something sucks, but just know that I'm here actually trying to make this better, because better content for you is also good for me. I don't want to have to make mistakes over and over again, so I love your feedback. But at pick number 4, I'm going to go in Connor Wigman. I did this on my last mock draft. I know I got some support for it for sure, but Connor Wigman's high-end play is ridiculous. My one issue with him is that I don't think he has enough experience yet, which is probably why he panics, because the stakes are a little bit higher. The red zone play for Connor Wigman is just awful. Like, genuinely awful. Just the way that he panics in the red zone is undeniable. Like, just the ball comes out of his hand differently. You can tell that he panics when there isn't as much room to play with. And I'm hoping that doesn't maintain as a common trend, but at the same time, I do think that it's going to be something that irons out with more experience, because when you're new to the game, because Connor hadn't started a ton of games at that point, I do give guys a little bit of slack, because that is such a big zone for where you can't make mistakes. And I think that it got to his head. That's something that could potentially be a huge red flag if it doesn't end up being fixed. But I do have faith that in time, with more and more reps, the game slows down in the red zone, and he's just able to focus on operating properly rather than not messing up. So Connor Wigman, crazy good arm, solid mobility. Like, he, to me, if I'm not mistaken, because I think I made this comment, but he's pretty much like Mac Jones with a more active arm, and probably, like, at the moment, a little bit less of an average processor. But because he's not necessarily the fastest guy on planet Earth here, but Connor Wigman does have that floor that I really do like in a developmental quarterback, with the ceiling of him being a genuine top-end starter. And because he is so new to the position, having to deal with injuries last year, I think I'm willing to push my board to let Connor get more benefit of the doubt. So keep that in mind right there as well. Connor Wigman goes at number 4 to New York. At pick number 5 to Tennessee, another team that I think is going to be far superior than what people were saying. I mean, they got L'Jarius Sneed on their squad. It's not like that. There's not really many areas that they actually got worse. And they ended up adding Calvin Ridley. Like, they ended up bringing on Boyd as well. And they have Callahan, who operated a really high-end offense, even when Joe Burrow had his injury issues. And they have a good offensive line, developing. Good compared to what they used to. So I think Tennessee's going to be a lot better than what people are giving them credit for. So keep that in mind as well. Regardless, I do think Will Campbell's not an awful option if you kick J.C. Latham back to right tackle, because J.C.'s a freak show. But Will Campbell doesn't give me the same energy that J.C. Latham did. And if J.C. is the type of tackle that Tennessee is looking for, I don't really see that type of tackle in this class for this range, except Emory Jones, which you're going to get 2 right tackles back to back. Like, that doesn't make too much sense to me. But it's not out of the question. I do like the idea of potentially going after, it's a pretty risky suggestion here, but Harold Perkins, someone who can be that linebacker early on, which, I mean, again, I don't really have him as a really good linebacker. I have him as an edge rusher up pretty high. But, you have someone who's just so flexible and so versatile. It's not like Arden Key is the savior. And especially in case of injury, you do have a lot of flexibility here. I will still be going offensive line. I will. And actually, I say it's not very plausible to go after right tackle, but if JC Latham is supposed to be the left tackle, Emory Jones is a freaking monster. He is my top graded tackle, and I'm going to give him the credit for it. You know what? He has the ferocity that JC Latham does. He has the patience as well. I think Emory Jones just sometimes gets a little bit in his head, and he gets a little bit too far forward on his toes. And that's one of the reasons that JC Latham was so successful. He sat back a little bit more on his heels. So I think Emory Jones could actually learn a thing or two, and he has that athleticism that's phenomenal. Worst case scenario with Emory Jones, he could be another Peter Skoronski and be, I think he could be better as a guard than Peter Skoronski. He could almost be a blue chip interior offensive lineman. Emory Jones is awesome. Like, I do think he's the most superior offensive tackle in this class. It's just, right tackle versus left tackle. And I really do like Will Campbell, so this is not a shade to him. It's just, I think that the ferocity and the overall athleticism that Emory Jones brings to the game is a little bit more up the alley of what the Titans would be trying to target. But pick number 6 for the Washington Commanders, like, you have a fine selection of overall picks here. You got Will Campbell. Calvin Banks is not bad at all. I mean, I haven't really brought him up, but that's because I think he's, a very serviceable offensive tackle. Could even be an offensive guard. He's 6'4". But I do think Will Campbell is going to be the pick I do go with here. How crazy it would be if they're just like, screw it, we're going to get a defensive interior of 4 elite players, Mason Graham, Jerzon Newton, as well as obviously Payne and Allen. That obviously will never happen. But I do think the offensive tackle spots need some extra juice. I know you just brought in Coleman. Brandon Coleman's a fun player. But it's so hard for me not to say yes to Will Campbell here. There's not a DB because, I mean, I love Ephesians Prysock. Obviously, I love Azariah Thomas. Azariah Thomas is a big stretch in terms of being in top 10 because he has so few reps. But Florida State had a really good rotation last year. You get to see him pretty much put 50 reps in a game, even as a backup. That's awesome. Like, there's a lot of really good corners in this class to where if I'm not getting one of the top guys, I can accept not going after one right now. But I do also think the Commanders would really love, and Dan Quinn would really love using another linebacker edge hybrid. And that's Harold Perkins here, especially with, you got Bobby Wagner there and like the crew. I do think that like Frankie Louvu as well. Harold Perkins' skill set as a flex edge rusher and linebacker could be a huge asset. And this could be, in a way, the Micah Parsons there for Dan Quinn there in Washington. Harold Perkins is phenomenal. I don't really think he's built to be a linebacker. I think he's really good in coverage and he's really good as a pass rusher. But for every other part of the game, I am a little bit concerned about what he can do. But I think that being good in coverage and being good as a pass rusher are both very, very valuable assets. Hence why I don't think it's an awful decision to take him at 6. Even if he is in that 225 pound to 230 range, I still would work with him because he's proven that hasn't been an inhibitor to his assets of his game. Like, he really is able to handle big tackles as a pass rusher. He's perfectly fine doing that. Like, you never want this guy to be someone that you have as your main dude to stop the run. But if you need someone to drop into coverage or pass rush, like, which are 2 key elements to the game, this guy is going to be a machine. And I do trust for him to be at least not a liability in the run game on the line of scrimmage. So Harold Perkins, edge rusher out of LSU, even though he plays linebacker, is going to be the pick. Pick number 7 for Vegas. This is the proper time to look at a quarterback. It is. However, I like Jalen Daniels. I like Dylan Gabriel. I wouldn't take either of them. Unless Jalen Daniels has a full year and proves to be as good as what I think he is. That's where I'm saying Jalen Daniels at pick 7. Fine. You know what? Again, I don't know why. I'm literally selling myself away from my own evaluations because, Like when it comes to quarterbacks who are 6 foot and under, it is very tough to sell yourself on them. But deep down, there are other positions to acquire for Vegas that I think might end up proving to have a more positive return on investment. Will Campbell might be the guy. I might just say, screw it, I'm moving Will to right tackle. I might just have to, right? Like, right tackle to me is the most valuable position on this team in terms of what you can replace. That being said, you got Blake Miller here. I do really like Blake Miller. I'm so excited to go into the deep dives because Arante Ersi, like that's a guy who I do really want to check out. I really do. So I'm finishing up with the safeties, and then you bet your ass like it's gonna be tackles that I do a deep dive first. Sorry. Y'all know how much I love offensive line. But Will Campbell's going to be the player here. Too good to pass on. At worst, you're getting probably the best guard duo in the NFL if you end up having JPJ and Will Campbell as your guards. But I know it's going to be tough switching from left to right tackle. At the end of the day, Will Campbell's like mechanics are not something to be marveled about. So having to work with those to move him to right tackle, I don't think is going to be the worst ROI for you anyways. Pick number 8 for the New Orleans Saints. Speaking of a team that took a tackle and switched it from left to right, or actually right to left, I do think they could be in the market for Kelvin Banks here. You might say like, damn, this is really quick for the offensive tackle class to come off the board. But when it comes down to it, it's primarily, like looking at it, it's primarily a defensive draft and an offensive line draft. Like we're talking about the top of the class. There's not a lot of really good depth. There's some good depth in here, but there's not like great depth. But I think Kelvin Banks would be a really fun one to add. I mean, you can move Tali Fuaga back to right tackle where he belongs, but Trevor Penning's been absolute cheeks, and especially if you're at pick number 8, I can guarantee you he's still not going to be an asset on your team. Ryan Ramczyk probably, I don't even know if he's playing this year, right? He has like no cartilage in his knee. So he's definitely not playing next year. And if he is, I'm very happy for him. And I'm hoping he's not doing it out of like necessity, because obviously it sucks to basically force a human being to play when they're physically not fit to play. But essentially, you're still going to be needing a tackle. That's the bottom line. And you're not going to be winning games if you have a crap offensive line, unless you have the best head coach of all time, which, no disrespect, I don't think that you have the number 1 coach in the league. So I am going to be going Kelvin Banks here. He might end up being a guard, but I actually didn't get that vibe from him. It's just the fact he's 6'4". He can hold his ground. A lot of people really love him. I do think he'll end up going higher than where I have him. Like looking at my board, where do I have this guy? Like Kelvin Banks is at 49. That's perfectly reasonable. Like offensive lineman is perfectly reasonable to have, like in that day 1 to day 2 range, that fringe starter mode, and just putting him in. And you have Tali Fuaga there. I think you might want to build that bookend tackle because for a while, that is what you had, right? Terran Armstead as well as Ryan Ramczyk were a killer dynamic duo when healthy. So being able to get that back again is a great way to consistently be viable both in the run game as well as in the pass. Then we have at pick number 9, the Minnesota Vikings. So Minnesota could see them try to address the defensive interior here, right? You ended up addressing edge rusher pretty damn well by bringing on Marcus Davenport. No, not Marcus Davenport. I'm tripping. You ended up bringing on Jonathan Grenard. It is Jonathan Grenard, right? Yeah, I'm tripping. I was thinking of Dre Greenlaw versus Jonathan Grenard. You ended up bringing on Houston's edge rusher for, I believe, $19 million a year, which is awesome, right? And then you brought on Dallas Turner. So you have your 2 starting edge rushers. I do think defensive interior still needs to be addressed. You could even try to look to add a 3rd weapon, but there's no real reason. You're already investing a lot in that receiving core as it is, and they're doing a great job. Offensive line wise, I think you guys are pretty much set. Quarterback, you just need to develop them over time. So I'm really focusing on defense here. And Mason Graham's used to the elements, even though it's not really going to be that big of a factor. But when you go to Lambeau, Mason Graham's used to that. He ain't gonna be shriveling up into pause. He's not going to be basically getting worse because he's out in the elements. He's not going to pull a Hawk Tua Tagovailoa. We are going to be going Mason Graham here for the Vikings. Again, someone who I have a little bit lower graded. He's at 35 on my board, but he is the top defensive interior that I have. Now going on to number 10, Arizona. It's a team that, they have a lot of really good things going for them, but I also do believe that, there are some potential roadblocks in the way. Kyler Murray was like, especially when the first years I was doing this, my first ever video that got 1,000 views was a records prediction for the Arizona Cardinals. I remember I was working as a Amazon shopper, which is essentially like you work in Whole Foods when people put in the order for Whole Foods on the Amazon app. Like I'm the guy who was, getting that stuff and then pretty much backing it up. And I just remember checking it during one of my breaks and I was like, the hell? So I ended up giving you guys pretty much a run to the Super Bowl. That didn't happen. But, I do love Kyler Murray a lot. I think that you guys have a lot of really good pieces. Trey Benson especially, like what a pickup. He was someone who I thought could have been, he was in my top 40, right? So I was a big fan of that pickup right there. You guys have a lot of very, very good players on your team. I do think you need a little bit more size in your secondary because you have a lot of dudes who are like sub 6 foot or like near 6 foot. Love Max Melton. He was a top 32 guy for me. But you have that. You have Garrett Williams. And you got like Elijah Jones, which I guess he is above 6 foot, but he's like 180 pounds. So you don't really have any of those players that can match up physically with the DK Metcalf. Unless you're going to put a linebacker or a safety on him, which, he was able to fool Deron Bland last year. So let's look at the corners that are available. I think Denzel Burke is awesome. I do. By the way, Sebastian Castro, he's going to be part of the safeties because it's safety/slot. And I was watching Xavier Nwankpa. This dude is a dog. I mean, I haven't graded him yet, but he kept popping off to me. So keep that in mind. Quincy Riley is another player who I really do like. He got his weight up as well. I did think that he's very, very smart. He has very high level elite zone instincts. I don't know if he's going to fit a Gannon system. I wouldn't think of Quincy Riley as a Gannon type of corner. I do think Denzel Burke is going to be essentially, he's good in everything. Like this is the one guy where you plug him in and forget that he's there. Like he's not going to be ever a liability. He might not be the most flashy corner out there, but there's nothing that he does poorly. And I love that about him. He's my number 15 player in the class. So this is obviously within range. And you can see PFF like ruining my vibe here by not having a bunch of the dudes. Like I love Davison Igbinison, who is another corner for Ohio State. He was the number 2 corner there. He wears number 1. He's a fun corner to watch too. But I think that Denzel Burke has been the most consistent over his whole career to the point where if I'm drafting and I just need to hit on a corner to be a reliable corner 1/2, Denzel Burke's the guy who I'm going after, even over someone who I have graded higher, because the level of risk that I'm taking with Davison Igbinison, who is, again, Denzel Burke's teammate, so they played on the same field, it's higher than Denzel Burke. There's almost a no-bust factor, in my opinion, for Denzel Burke, because even when he had his sophomore slump, he improved over the year to get just as good as his true freshman year. And I love that. I love, when you get knocked down, you get back up. That's exactly what Denzel Burke did. He had a phenomenal year last year, got even better. Like, one of the best players that I've just studied in terms of floor, especially at the corner position. I'm a big fan of Denzel Burke. We're going to be going him for you guys, and that's going to give you a really solid rotation of corners there as well, because you have Elijah Jones, you have Max Melton, you also have Garrett Williams, and that's a really healthy rotation of corners that you haven't had in a very long time. Defensive interior, absolutely a position I think you should be looking to target, but again, when you're talking about the difference between my number 15 player and my number 50, essentially, which is like the best of both, not even the best of both, but, high floor Denzel Burke versus, higher ceiling Kenneth Grant, I think it's pretty obvious what you should go after. If you are trying to go after a luxury pick versus, you need somebody to fill a role, then, you could debate. But right now, you need a defensive interior to hit and you need a corner to hit. Go after the player that's going to hit, right? Don't take the risk. And Denzel Burke is not the guy who is the risk. Pick number 11 for Seattle. You got some big names falling, but it happens every single time. But, Seattle, if you're at number 11, you will be looking for a quarterback. You will. Sam Howell's, at that point, you'll see some starts, and maybe he gives you some hope. But this team is honestly too damn good to be at number 11 overall. But again, It's not my order. This is based on FanDuel's Super Bowl odds. So if you guys are at this position, right, your defensive backfield, in my opinion, is fine. Your linebacking core could use a little bit of work, but honestly, based on what you guys have done this offseason, I really like it. You got, I'm forgetting the linebacker, I think Dotson from Buffalo. Really good pickup. And then Tyrese Knight was something I absolutely loved. In the most recent stream that Broshmo and I did, we ended up we built a team based on selecting one guy from each round over the past 3 years. And one of my linebacker picks was Tyrese Knight because I just love his fit for Seattle. His high-level play really was that jaw-dropping. So big fan of that. But wide receivers, an underrated position to target at this point. Being said, there's just not many good wide receivers. I'm not a fan of Luther Burden in terms of the fact that he takes off reps that he shouldn't. Again, it's fine if guys are a little bit more reserved, but still maybe can give off the fact it's like, hey, I'm still running at good speed, so you need to respect me on plays that they aren't targeted. The Luther's running like 50% speed on plays that he's not targeted and running 60 to 80% on plays that he is supposed to be targeted. And how you can see that is seeing the variation of effort between rep. And there's a pick that Harold Perkins ended up getting, and it was just like one of the worst effort plays I've seen from Luther Burden. He was pretty much jogging his post route, and to me that's unacceptable. Like, I mean, call me a grandpa, whatever, but as someone who has been a Steelers fan, watching guys not put forth consistent effort, like, that's something I don't respect. And my comfort Luther Burden is Deontay Johnson. I think his talent is phenomenal. And it's not going to work for Seattle anyways. Jackson Smith and Jigba should be the slot there. But it's just a commentary onto why Luther Burden hasn't gone earlier. Tetairoa McMillan is just not my type of guy. And he's just not. He's 6'5". He has the best hands probably in college. Possibly ever. I mean, like, it's pretty hard to deny the fact that this guy can moss anybody. But that's pretty much all he's really good for. If you really look at the stats, you look at him getting a lot of yards, and that's awesome. But the actual separation generation is not there. There's always going to be someone on him, and yeah, it's great to be able to catch in traffic. Again, arguably best hands in college all time. You cannot just be at the catch point with the defender every single time. You have to find ways to beat them besides being taller and besides having just your hands, right? Because defenders in the NFL are a lot better at getting their hand in the way, a lot better at positioning. They're just, you can't use it as much in the NFL. And I'm hoping I'm proven wrong because Tetairoa was the guy who I wanted in my top 10 coming into the year. And he ended up not being my top 10 receivers. So keep that in mind as well. So that kind of ruins that potential there. I would love the idea of Travis Hunter, but he's a corner for me. I mean, he is. I didn't fall in love with him when I was watching Shedeur Sanders, and he'll be listed in the deep dive for wide receivers 100%, but it just didn't get to me to the point where I got excited. I think wide receivers is a position you should target round 2 to 4, I would say. And maybe you could look at Deone Walker here, who is going to just be in that massive rotation. I think that's perfectly fine, but quarterback at this point needs to be the pick. And Carson Beck at this point has the high enough floor to where you can have that Geno impact. And I think it works really well in this offense. Like, Carson Beck's mobility works really well. And yes, I know that Waldron ended up going to Chicago, but it's not a drastic tense shift, so to speak, in terms of the offensive philosophy. I think Carson Beck will be able to run this offense very, very well if you are at number 11, which shows that you didn't even really make a push for the playoff. Pick number 12 for the Indianapolis Colts, another team that I do think is a little bit low. But again, it's very, very variable because of AR being healthy or not. You guys ended up addressing your edge number 1 issue this past year with Leatu Latu. Loved it. You have probably the best first 2 rounds out of any team. It really was phenomenal getting A.D. Mitchell there in round number 2 because you answered pretty much all the questions that are the big ones. Now, corner still is a pretty big question that I did not see answered properly. And I really love Quincy Riley because he brings physicality. He's not going to be the biggest athletic freak, which, you know, technically could be something that turns the Colts off, so to speak. But he's somebody who has that big hit stick. He's very, very high IQ. And I do think that he's going to get a lot of love. Louisville produces some very, very talented defensive backs. And again, he's going to be about 195, if I'm not mistaken. He was 185 last year. He's 6 foot, super duper smart. Like, just a guy that I do think will be very valuable. But deep down, I think Azariah Thomas, if he hits his ceiling, is the perfect corner for the Colts. He was the backup corner for Florida State last year. He's going to be the starter this year. And he was just so damn talented, like elite athleticism with very, very sticky coverage and even some instincts in zone, which I do love to death. But he's just so raw that I couldn't really put him higher than what I wanted to. But check out my corner video for that. I do think that we will reduce the risk here and go after Quincy Riley because, again, Azariah Thomas has never been actually a full-time starter. But I do think that's a name I would really love to throw in, which I will be throwing in later. Quincy Riley just gets a ton of love from Louisville players or Louisville fans, and he deserves it. Pick number 13 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm running to the podium for James Pierce here. Their edge rushing core, not great. Yaya Diaby and Joe Tryon Shoyinka should not be a terrifying top 2, and they aren't. And James Pierce has a lot of untapped potential there, and he's still developing. He just needs a little bit more time to finish up that development. At pick number 14 for the Steelers, this is an interesting spot because you can go after Travis Hunter and get a very interesting corner / weapon. Like, it just depends on where you want to put him because Dante Jackson has 1 year left. Travis Hunter could be that corner that we are looking for. And I think that'd be really awesome. But there are some personality concerns with the guys who are over at Colorado. Just unfortunately, it's a program that emphasizes ego above actual talent. And they have a ton of talent, but it's just so much bravado, so much marketing. And I respect it from primetime standpoint. He brought Colorado from a no-name school to something that we all know now. But it's just a bunch of BS drama that I personally, if I'm the leader of an organization, call me a boomer, I'm just not a huge fan of when I have other really good options on the table. With Cam Hayward potentially being like someone who's going to step down in 1 or 2 more years, I love the idea of testing Dayon Walker here. It says he's an edge rusher, which he has played some edge rusher reps, but he's 6'6", 350. He needs to get his pad level lower, but if he ends up hitting, which the Steelers know how to make these guys hit. The defensive line has never been a problem for the Steelers, and with Cam Hayward on the end of his career, I do think that it is worth trying to take more swings. Like DeMarvin Leal was kind of a whoopsies, but DeMarvin Leal was just he was a weird tweener. Dayon Walker's not a tweener. He's 350 pounds at 6'6". If you teach him the intricate parts of the game, he is unstoppable. The problem is, I just think if he doesn't go to a team like the Steelers that are really good at developing these guys, I think it's a little bit more risk than reward. So I'm going to be going Dayon Walker here for my Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that he could be a phenomenal asset when all is said and done. I do think if we are at number 14 overall, we will be bringing back one of the QBs for an extra year and just, basically writing it out because getting QB3 in this class at pick 14, probably not the best move. Pick number 15 for the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a team that has been doing a very, very solid job at addressing a lot of different pain points. However, I still think they do need to get a number 1 or a number 2 defensive back on their team. Jabbar Muhammad is probably going to be a little bit more of a slot for me, but he could absolutely work on the squad. Jabbar Muhammad's a great player. I was a big fan of his at Washington. This actually might end up being my Azariah Thomas pick. He's physically unbelievable, but he's also right down the street, and he's going to be extremely young and athletic. Kind of reminds me a little bit of what Brian Thomas could bring to the table when we were talking about him a little bit over a year ago. So I will be we'll be using Denver Harris as the placeholder value here, but I will just say right now that this is Azariah Thomas, Florida State corner. I do think this team needs to prioritize that a little bit more. Didn't do a very good job of that, but it's okay. It's not all over there for the Jaguars. I also think that they are a little bit more underrated than what I give them credit for. Pick 16 for the Bears. You're at a great spot to where this is where you can get a Luther Burden, right? You're going to be having Romo Dunze as well as DJ Moore, but in the slot, Keenan Allen's probably not going to be there after a year. So Luther Burden's going to be a great compliment. And I think that's probably where I want to go. Like, you could go after a safety like Malachi Starks at this point, and there's some good safeties in this class. So I might want to pump the brakes a little bit there. Because I think Luther Burden, even if he does have his little grouchy moments, the talent is undeniable and it fits really well. And when you have Caleb Williams as your quarterback, you might be a little bit more inspired than Brady Cook. So I'm going to be optimistic about Luther Burden here at 16. At pick 17 for the Chargers, it's very, very tough not to go after Colston Loveland at this point. Is Takario Davis moving to safety? I did not think he was moving to safety. If he is, I think that's phenomenal because his change of direction was my big issue with him, and he's super smart. Like, that would be A+. I would probably move Takario up my board, and he's already up my board. That's the thing. But regardless, for the Chargers specifically, Colston Loveland is so awesome because he was used as an X wide receiver as well. This team does need to use its tight end a little bit better. And I think that this might be the move. It's kind of a forced move, but you know what? Check out my tight ends video. I dropped it yesterday. I work during my work on tape studies and on some graphics. And, I labor for y'all, but I love y'all. And Colston Loveland was one of my top tight ends. I think he is awesome. And he's my number 22 player on my board right now. So having him there at 17, understandably, pretty damn awesome. Pick number 18 for the Cleveland Browns. This is a team that has emphasized its love for the wide receiver position. I don't think they're going to be addressing it after addressing it with a lot of cash. So looking at other positions, even though I don't really think there's many that they really need to hit on, I do think that going after a defensive back is not a horrible idea. It's not. There's not much to actually target for this team. You have developmental tackles like DeJuan Jones. You have developmental interior offensive linemen like Luke Whippler. You have really good contingency plans pretty much everywhere. But you don't really have a Malachi Starks, I would say. And Malachi Starks is awesome. And deep down as a Steelers fan, I don't want to give you Malachi Starks. But I'm going to. Malachi Starks goes to the Browns. Pick number 19 for the Los Angeles Rams. Oh, there's so many good players in this class. There really is. My next best player is going to be Jack Kaiser, linebacker out of Notre Dame. This is not going to be a team that would take Jack Kaiser. Then I have Donovan Booker. Look at that. Combine Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson. Tyler Booker and Donovan Jackson. Interior offensive line is pretty much handled by the Rams for the next 3 years, roughly. Then we go to the defensive back. Ephesians Prysock. I just don't know if the Rams are going to draft a defensive back this early because they're pretty damn good at sniping guys down the board. So then you got Dylan Gabriel, not going to be going after a QB like that for this offense. I don't think it's out of the question to go after a QB. But again, this is a class where you can get Riley Leonard round 2, round 3. I'd be happier with that personally. So looking at it, you could go after that left tackle spot. God, I keep forgetting how quickly this class deteriorates. Blake Miller is my next best offensive tackle, but he's a right tackle. I don't trust him to move to the left because he looks really uncomfortable when he's out of his comfort zone. And so I'm not going to be doing that for y'all. So looking at other positions that maybe I will be targeting, I might have to go defensive back at this point. I do think tight end is not out of the question here because they were trying to move up for Brock Bowers. This is a pretty damn solid tight end class, I must admit. But why do they have the most mid tight ends listed here? Luckily, my number 1 tight end is sitting right here in Mitchell Evans, and I do think this is a team that would be open to bringing him on because all the teams that would draft Mitchell Evans after this are the direct competitors to the Rams in the playoffs. Fun fact, I actually have the Rams really highly rated. I think that they just need to get, honestly, tight end as the primary position, tight end and left tackle. So we're going to be going Mitchell Evans here, tight end out of Notre Dame. He is far superior to every other tight end besides Brock Bowers in last year's class, so it's understandable that if you're really looking to upgrade at that receiving position, Mitchell Evans might be the one who is right for you. Great blocker, great receiver, literally just an all-around really great tight end. Pick number 20 for the Atlanta Falcons. At this point, you can't say no to Travis Hunter because as a receiver, he's going to be great. As a corner, he's going to be great. And I think Kirk Cousins can keep some egos in check. He might end up being a wide receiver for the squad, but, Rondale Moore is going to be up for a contract. It's certainly in the books to be able to have Travis Hunter be able to work as a receiver, but I do think his best asset is as a corner, which AJ Terrell can train him up well. Pick number 21 for the Miami Dolphins. It's a team that you can go a lot of different routes, but Yeah, I mean, Tua's contract is going to be a pain in the ass. I mean, you could just try to wait it out and try to get one of these quarterbacks. I would kind of lament doing that personally, but it is what it is, man. I do think offensive line not out of the question, even though you went after. I'm forgetting his name. How am I forgetting the Houston tackle's name right now? But left tackle out of Houston that you drafted last year. But I just was not a big fan of his. At the same time, again, you're pretty much looking at the right tackle here, which you already have locked down. Also, offensive line just isn't valued very much in a very quick offense, so you could throw that in there as well. You could try to look at wide receiver at this point. Isaiah Bond is Isaiah Bond? Yeah. I'm tripping. I was thinking of Jacoby Myers. Is it Jacoby Myers? No. Ja'Cory Brooks. Jesus. Ja'Cory Brooks going to, I think he's Louisville now. But Isaiah Bond was someone who I really, really like. I think he's my number 2. Is he my number 2 wide receiver? He is at number 31 overall on my board. I'd be a big fan of that addition because he is electric. I just don't think he goes in the first round. I think he should, but I don't think he does. But other positions for the Dolphins, again, you could try to say quarterback. Not going to. Offensive line just doesn't seem to be valued enough by the Dolphins organization for me to want to do that. Cornerback, you have Fuller there, who's awesome. Obviously, Ramsey. You got some good depth there, so I'm not going to force that either. You're in a relatively solid position, but this is where I could see a longer-term linebacker get taken. And I think Jack Kaiser is arguably a blue chip linebacker. He's my number 4 player on my board. I think he deserves to go in this range. I think he deserves to go higher, but Jack Kaiser is going to be the selection there. It's too good to pass on him. I picked number 22. Again, if you guys don't think I'm doing enough analysis, first off, tell me. I don't want this video to be like 3 hours long. It's just not my game. It's not going to be great for you either. But also, I have videos out on all these players. So go and just check those out as well, because I really want to emphasize how deep I go onto these players and break down every single category. And then, especially, I believe it was for linebackers that I did this first. And then also tight ends. I go and read you off an entire game of analysis, all my notes, my personal notes. So they're not really designed for you to hear. I was like, hell, this is a cool way for me just to show exactly how I felt during the game. So check that out as well, because Jack Kaiser was a big surprise to me, but I fell in love with him. Pick number 22, you got the New York Jets. This could be where you go for a quarterback. I just don't think so. It's just not a team that I would aim to go after a quarterback at this point. It's another team that I could have seen Jack Kaiser going to, but you could also look at some extra DB depth. Jabbar Muhammad actually fits this defensive backcourt really well. He could be in that slot for you guys, and he could play a very, very big role. I do think tight end is a position I think I'd be looking to target. But the guy who I'd be looking for right here is my number 25 player in the draft, Jake Brenningstool. Could go after interior offensive line as well, but you could go after tackle too. Both the tackles are on 1-year contracts. It's just, actually, that's not a bad idea at all. I forgot about the fact that both tackles are on 1-year contracts. You have Olu Fashanu being the heir apparent at left tackle. Blake Miller could be the heir apparent at right tackle. He's a super high floor player. Where's he at on my board? Blake, he's at 38. So he's a legitimate right tackle. Some people say he has some potential length issues, but dude, this guy's not built to be a guard. Every time he has a tight end next to him, this dude looks like a fish out of water. So keep that in mind as well. Luckily, the Jets don't have very good tight ends, so I doubt you'd actually want to do that. But with that in mind, Blake Miller is just a really consistent tackle. Like, he just has really solid footwork. There's not much that's actually bad with him. He doesn't have the bells and whistles that you might want, but at the same time, he does bring a level of confidence to the field that you could feel comfortable drafting in the first round, in my opinion. Pick number 23, we got the Green Bay Packers. And you could also try to upgrade your receiving core by getting someone like T-Mac there. It's a team, honestly, that I think is overloaded with talent to the point where it's like, I don't know really what to get you guys. like there's not really much to draft. Like, you could look at an offensive tackle, but I would just kick Zach Tom back out from center. But it's like, you already have really good tackle talent. I just don't even know what's up. So it's really, really weird spot because your running back core is filled up, your tight end core is filled up, your receiving core, I mean, you could go T-Mac here to get a bona fide one. Might be the best move, right? Like, you just might as well. It worked with Dontavian Wicks. I think it could work with Tetairoa McMillan. Uh, I mean, there's just not many other positions. You could look at a corner. Cool. Like defense interior, you have a good rotation as well. Edge rusher, you're unbelievably deep. Linebacker, you address that pretty damn well. So I'm gonna go T-Mac. I mean, it's one of the positions you guys have yet to draft a true X and like actually be a consistent X. You have a lot of really good receivers, but maybe not one that's great. I don't think Tet's great, but he also brings an element to the game that might actually elevate your offense more than him as a holistic wide receiver. So feel free to give me some feedback on that. If you guys hate it, obviously I want to learn from those, but I do think that T-Mac would be an asset, at least on the Giants. Pick number, on the Giants, I'm tripping, on the Packers. Pick number 24, the Texans. This team doesn't need very much. It's also a really well-built team. I do think Jabbar Muhammad might be the guy, though. I love Jabbar Muhammad. Granted, I have dudes above him. Again, it doesn't make sense. But Jabbar Muhammad has that personality that I think it just fits this team so well. D'Amico loves guys who are physical. And he goes after corners that maybe aren't going to be... Like, Jabbar has some blinders on, so to speak, when he plays. But when you are the guy that Jabbar is locked up with, he locks you up. It's hard to get better man-to-man corner than Jabbar Muhammad. The rest could be mitigated, so to speak. I just love him to death. I think he's going to do very, very well in Oregon. Pick number 25 for the Dallas Cowboys. Could be a quarterback here. Shedeur Sanders, I've made my claims about even Travis Hunter, but Travis Hunter doesn't have remotely close to the amount of baggage that Shedeur does. Because it's not like Shedeur has a cannon of an arm. It's not like Shedeur is an elite athlete. Like, if he had either of those things along with the assets he does have, like probably one of the better processors of the class, can keep an offense in rhythm, doesn't make unnecessary mistakes, like, then I'd be, fine. Screw it. We're going to see if he can just mature in the NFL. But the fact is, it's not like he's going to be able to thread a needle with unbelievable zip. Like, Drew Aller, I would probably roll the dice on if he had similar personality concerns as Shedeur, and then we kind of basically gave him the processor of Shedeur Sanders, or let's just say the consistency, I would take Drew Aller in a second. Of course, I have my issues with Drew Aller, and I'm a Penn State fan. Y'all know that. So we'll keep that in mind. But basically, Shedeur doesn't have the physical upside for me to accept him as a franchise quarterback because of all that baggage as well. So I'm going to leave that on the table there. I do think the Cowboys should be looking at a running back. They should. We're blessed in this class with unreal talent. You can have every flavor of running back that you want. You want a home run hitter? Ollie Gordon's for you. You want a consistent back that chooses the right hole and can power through a player? Quinshon Judkins is right for you. You want all of that, but you might have to worry about some fumbles? Ashton Genty's that for you. You want somebody who's going to be electric? Then Trevor Etienne is for you. Like, you just want someone who you never have to really worry about doing anything poorly, but maybe, you want to take a day 3 swing at somebody who's just going to be really solid? Devin Neal's for you. So, like, it's just an overloaded class in terms of your roles. But I will say, there's not many of each type. There's just really good players of most types. Like, for home run hitting, you got Ollie Gordon, Trey Henderson, and Donovan Edwards. I think those are the guys who are those home run hitters. You can say Trevor Etienne as well, but I think Trevor Etienne's a little bit more balanced, except for the blocking. He's absolute ass as a blocker. But if you want to look at the guys who are more one-cut backs that can just hit the hole and do it right the first time, you got Quinshon Judkins, you got Ashton Genty. Like, probably those are going to be the guys I recommend for that. So it really depends. When you look at the running backs that you do have on roster, right? Like, you brought Zeke Elliott back for a reason. It's not like he's going to be old Zeke, but he's someone who can push that extra yard. And I think going back to Ohio State and getting Quinshon Judkins, who's been reliable for multiple years of football already, and he's going to a system that is very complementary to his skill set with Trey Henderson, you're going to be able to get an easy way in to looking at what you should be getting, which is essentially another Zeke Elliott. So I'm going to go after Quinshon Judkins here. I think he's phenomenal. I think he deserves a ton of respect. Someone who I love to death. Pick number 26 for the Buffalo Bills. So I think edge rusher is a position that wouldn't be a bad target to go after. I think defensive back is not a bad position to target. I do think the receiving core can still use a little bit of a step up. You got Keon Coleman there, obviously, but if you want to get a little bit more electricity, get like a Humidor in round number 2 on the outside. I just don't really see many round 1 receivers, and I think that's okay. With that being said, deep down, I really want to go after 2 of my top 6 players, which are my guards. Just not many teams that are kind of desperate for that guard role, which, as Lions fans know, they always just end up getting a really damn good player by the fact that they just fall. But that being said, Bills, I still think should be looking at a running back here. I don't think that it shouldn't be out of the question to go after Ashton Genty, because I think he could be a really big asset to this team. And I do think the running back core, not necessarily the biggest asset. It could be closest to the biggest liability, as a matter of fact, on this team. You know, looking at it defensive interior-wise, I just don't really see anybody. Kenneth Grant wouldn't be a bad choice at this point. And same thing with Tyleik Williams. I think both of those guys could be really solid weapons. But anyways, I do think... I thought I was taking Jake Brittingstool to a team, but I'm tripping. I love Jake Brittingstool to death. The dude's so fun. The dude's awesome. But, I was thinking about it for the Jets, and then ended up going with another Clemson player. But regardless, I really love Jake Brittingstool. I can't say that enough. But for the Bills, I mean, honestly, I just want to get an every down back. I want to take as much responsibility off the receiving core, or much tension off the receiving core as possible. I'm going Ashton Genty here. A lot of people's RB1, but he's someone who's just so damn reliable, and he brings athleticism that Quinshon doesn't fully have. But he just has that fumbling issue, which, you know, could be fixed within a year, but his talent is awesome. For the Philadelphia Eagles at pick number 27, you guys have pretty much everything locked down. Right tackle, maybe not so much, but this is also not the class. If you see this as like the tackles that are available, I'd be a little bit concerned. I wouldn't be a huge fan of that. Now, you could draft Jaden Roberts out of Alabama, the right guard, and train to be a right tackle. I personally think he should be, but I just don't think he will. That hurts my feelings, but, you know, who gives a shit about my feelings? I do think you could look for a pure safety. Like, there are some really, really good ones. Xavier Nwangpa, by the way, pairing him back up with, what is it, the Ku Klux Clamps? I think that's like the nickname of Reed Blankenship, as well as Cooper DeJean. Like, that could be something that I see working for you guys. It's just so weird, because if you have Coop being your pure slot, then, you know, Xavier Nwangpa is the right guy for you. I think that would be probably the best pick you can do for the Eagles at this point. Now, you could try to address the receiving core, because, you know, I love Johnny Wilson. I think he'll end up being your guy, but at the same time, you know, there certainly is some concerns over who the true slot receiver is, right? You look at the Texas A&M receiver that's slipping my mind right now. I keep wanting to say Evan Stewart, but I know it's not that. Evan Stewart's teammate. But, like, he's not necessarily someone who I would even start every single down. So I do think you could have some questions there where Isaiah Bond could be that dude who's that vertical threat that you're looking for. That being said, I do think that your receiving core is probably going to be locked down. And you could end up looking at tight end, because you drafted a tight end when Zach Ertz, well, actually when the guy before, Brent Selleck, was 28, and then Zach Ertz was 28, and then Dallas Goedert's going to be 29. So this is right around the time where you start drafting tight ends. And I'm going to go Jake Brittingstool here. He is smaller than the tight ends that you normally get. He is still actually a pretty comparable blocker, but he's not going to be an elite blocker. But he's an elite route runner. He has elite technique. And to me, that's worth taking the swing on. So I'm going to let Luke Lackey get a little ADP boost here. So power to you, buddy. But this is going to be Jake Brittingstool, tight end out of Clemson. Pick 28 for the Cincinnati Bengals. There's not many positions I think they're desperate for. I do think interior offensive line's not a bad position to go at this point. I love Tyler Booker. I mean, the dude's literally my number 5 player in the class. I'm saying screw it. I'm going to draft these guys as soon as possible. Jonah Sauvignon is a center? Who updated this? Who didn't tell me that the right tackle moved to center. That's ridiculous. I really need to fact check that. That doesn't seem right because I looked at Arizona's roster back when I was doing the tackles, and he was listed as a tackle. I don't know whose mans thinks that Jonah is going to be a center, and if he is, I am just so stoked to see how that works because it's just weird to see an actual capable right tackle move to center when you lose your left tackle. Like what organization pretty much loses their right and left tackle in the same time? Anyways, for the Lions, I want to go after a left guard, and Tyler Booker would have been great. Probably would have been the best option. However, I have somebody that is right next to him, and whose mans did not put Donovan Jackson on here? Like, seriously? Like, what's up with this? Oh, PFF, man. So my number 6 player in the class, Donovan Jackson, left guard, Ohio State. He's basically, Tyler Booker is the higher floor of the left guards. That it's going to be essentially blue chip. Then you also have Donovan Jackson, who's going to be the higher ceiling version of that. Feel free to, again, watch the interior offensive lineman videos to check that out. But you know what? I want to give some love to Jonah Monheim. Appreciate your ADP boost, buddy. But this is going to be the left guard out of the Ohio State University in Donovan Jackson. He's going to be the heir apparent. I know that you have, in the 6th round, you drafted Christian Mahogany, but to me, that's a guy who you really want in your rotation, not being a pure full-time starter. When you can get a top 6 player in a class at 29, to me, you go and get it. Pick number 30 for the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, I might even target Abdul Carter at this point. That'd be pretty damn good value. But running back, I do think, not a bad choice. Derrick Henry was on a cheap contract. He still will be. But, to me, when you get someone like Ollie Gordon, that would be somebody, or Trevor Etienne, that'd be scary as hell. To be fair, Etienne, to me, feels very similar role to Keaton Mitchell. So, wouldn't do that. Offensive line still should be at least looked at as an option. Again, you're really limited on your options at this point. My next best players that are not, they could go after DBs as well. Ephesians Prysock actually feels like a Raven. We're going to go Ephesians Prysock. He's a former Arizona corner going to Washington. He's a fun, athletic freak show. And I'm going to let Tommy Hill enjoy his ADP boost here. But Ephesians Prysock, my number 7 player in the class, ends up going to the Baltimore Ravens. At pick 31 for the 49ers, I would look at tight ends here still. My next best tight end is Oscar Delp out of Georgia. And that's actually probably going to be the guy I go with. He's on sale version of, I guess it's easy to say this, Brock Bowers. But at 31, that's worth drafting. So it's not going to be Brant Kuithe. Again, it's going to be a placeholder there for my number 39 player on my board, Oscar Delp. This is a team that's going to need to have a contingency plan at tight end. You don't have very many. You don't have much time left there with George Kittle. So I think it's time to get a contingency plan. And I know for a fact that the Chiefs would be very much open to Oscar Delp if he fell to 32. But speaking of the Chiefs, I do think that there's not many positions for the Chiefs to target. I don't really know exactly the best position for them to target because they've already done a good job of filling up interior offensive line with depth to develop over a year in case they have to get rid of one of the guys in Trey Smith. Why am I forgetting the center's name? I'm tripping. Formerly Oklahoma center. That's probably my biggest miss of all time right there. But anywho, offensive tackle still technically on the table, but we've talked about it ad nauseum at this point. Just not worth it. I do think that, if you really are that not confident in your offensive line, Jaden Roberts is like a perfect replacement. He's a right guard there for Bama who could be a right tackle. But wide receiver wise, I think you guys are fine. Running back wise, I think you guys are fine. Tight end wise, it's where you can end up potentially taking a swing. But, the next best tight end for me, did I put him in? Yeah, it's Amari Niblack. And he's 230 pounds. I just can't see that I can't see that many tight ends going in the first round, especially when he is going to be pretty much a receiver for you. So looking at the next best options available, the top end edge rushers are still on the board. I just don't think Spags is going to like many of them. Like, there's just not enough size there except for Shamar Turner. You got Princely Umanmielen. That's cool. But again, it's like, this is a class that's not really built for the Kansas City Chiefs. However, I do think defensive interior would be quite fun. You got Kenneth Grant and Tyleik Williams. I think Tyleik is a better player than Kenneth Grant. But I think Kenneth Grant is a higher ceiling player who has I think he's been more hamstrung by the lack of development that the coaching gave him rather than the lack of development because he's just not good enough. I think there's a lot of untapped potential there that is not his fault. And I think he'd be able to work out and be unbelievable. He caught up to Katron Allen from behind. So he's going to be my final pick, even though technically Tyreek Williams is higher. But that's going to be the video. I don't know how long this is. It's probably going to be upwards of an hour. So hopefully you guys do enjoy it. Oops, this play isn't in our playbook yet. What the hell is that? All right. That's interesting. PFF has some new stuff they have in the works. But again, feel free. Again, these guys like Luke Lackey are definitely not the pick. So there are some placeholders in here. You guys will have to, if you guys are skipping around, you guys will probably want to watch those portions. But that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoying this time with me. Again, use that underdog code and be able to have a little bit more skin in the game. Enjoy yourselves. Do it legally. Do it responsibly. Don't spend money you don't have. But if you do have some extra cash on the side and want to have a little bit more fun with sports, it's a great way to do so. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.